Sure. I was in advertising for about 15 years, and I used to work on Super Bowl spots and large brands out of New York City. And then I went to school for about 20 years to university until I finally graduated. I finally graduated, I think, in 2007, something like that. But I graduated with honors. I just lacked 2 credits in biology. So it took me forever to graduate. But I did okay anyway, even without graduating. I went to the University of Minnesota. Back then, at least what I knew, was that it didn't really matter where you went to college, just so you went to college. Yeah, it didn't matter which college, just that you went. And of course, that was completely wrong, but anyway, I survived anyway. I did all right. Very quickly, I was working on a project for a client, and I started to think about, or wonder why we believe in some companies and their products and services and not in others. And people were talking about Nike tribes and the Apple cult and things like that. And I just started wondering, and I started with trust and vision and all of those things. But I quickly got to the things that all the powerful brands had in common. They all had a logo, they all had a creation story. And then after that, it just, they all had rituals, they all had people who didn't want to be with them. You know, at that time, there were the Cola Wars and the Burger Wars and Mac versus PC, Apple versus, PCs. And then the pieces just started lining up for me. And then the real realization was that this did not just apply to brands, it applied to people, and it applied to cities, and it applied to nations, and then finally companies, products and services. It wasn't just one company, it was a group of companies. And the ones that really validated the concept were all the companies that we all know. And Starbucks, Apple, Nike, Coca-Cola at that time was popular, and so I just looked at all the popular brands and then tried to see what they all had in common. And it was really built upon a problem that I had, a client problem I had, because clients would always ask, well, why, at that time, Starbucks, you have to think about 15 years ago, Starbucks and Google and people like that weren't advertising. But they were still becoming very popular. So why was that happening? And it had nothing to do with advertising. And so we would always be asked when we were presenting advertising campaigns, why should we be spending $20 million, $30 million on this advertising program when other Google and Starbucks aren't advertising and they're becoming very successful? And so that was a problem. And so when I figured out that the primal, what I called primal branding existed, that there was this other construct out there that really was intentional and was purposeful and was relevant and resonant and did all of the things that advertising and traditional marketing tried to do, but you could do it without any money at all, just by putting these pieces in place. Well, that was revelatory. We share our beliefs and become successful only through word of mouth, really. So but out there in the world, there are lots of companies, and they're the ones everyone else uses: Starbucks, Apple, Nike. But there are a lot of new brands that are coming up that also use it and are becoming successful as well. So that's great. The summer of 2001 to come up with the concept. So during May, June, and July of 2001, I was thinking about primal brand. I came up with the idea for primal branding. And then I took August off because no one does anything. I was living in New York City. No one does anything in August, right? They're all in the Hamptons or somewhere. And then but I did organize to speak at a conference in August, excuse me, not in August, in October. I organized it in August. And then September 11th happened. And no one really cared about a new branding idea after 9/11. And so everyone's concerned with other things, right? And so it was just a concept that I had. And then I did give the speech in October, and I gave other speeches around the country, Atlanta, Minneapolis, and other places. And I would use the primal branding speech when I spoke, sometimes when it was appropriate. And finally someone came up to me and asked me if I knew of this other guy who has another idea about branding, and I said yes. And he said, well, I like his idea and I like your idea, and I'm going to use the two of them to create my own idea. And I went, well, that's interesting. I don't know if you should have told me that. But anyway, then I shared that with a friend, and my friend said, Pat, you need to write a book. And so I looked around for an agent, and I was lucky to get one, and through a friend. And then it took me 3 months to write the book, and with Simon & Schuster, and there you go. Yes, Rachel Lightfoot, who was working at Google and YouTube at the time, she has a great video about, she tells how it happened. And Rachel was assigned to look at all the top YouTube videos and see if there were any patterns there that made them why they became successful, any patterns that helped them become successful. So Rachel looked at all the top, I'm going to say this again, okay? That was very bad. Rachel Lightfoot was assigned at YouTube to look at all the top videos with the most views and see if there are any patterns between them. And so after looking for a while, and then she came across, during the course of that, she came across primal branding and my book, saw that all the patterns were embedded in the book. And so they said, let's just assign the book to read, and there you go. So how I found out about that though is kind of funny, because a friend YouTube made primal branding required reading if you wanted to be certified as a YouTuber. And so I didn't find out about that until a friend of mine was taking the course for certification, and he sent me a text, hey, they're teaching your book here. And so from that, I got connected to Rachel, and we introduced ourselves, and we had coffee together and met, and we're great friends today. So we were both together on stage at VidCon last year. Yes, well, there's sort of a cottage industry of YouTubers using the concept in this book to have videos about it. And so there's one guy who did primal branding plus Tesla, and has over 300,000 views, for example, which is incredible. Good for him. And there are other people too. And so Tim Schmoyer is one of them. I do sessions with him frequently, and a couple times, that is several times a year, and with other YouTubers as well. Been on their stations or channels. And they're not surprises either. Nike, Amazon, Apple, Netflix. I like Goop, and I like Warby Parker, and several other brands. Yeah, and they all do a good job in totally different categories. Why I usually want to be asked, why did I create primal branding? And I think I may have answered that, but I think, why did I create it? I created it because I had a problem in business. Most writers are they're either professors, or they're journalists, or they're people who are in the business, and I'm in the business, and in the business of communicating with people and trying to build brands, trying to help enterprise do better. And so this construct really, we work with it every day, and we help clients every day. And some of them are billion-dollar brands. Some of them are companies who just want to become billion-dollar brands. Some of them are just companies who want to figure out how to make their lives easier, because usually trying to create a brand is really a swirl. And I've often said it's like molding fog. And being alone and trying to figure, and being in the dark, I should say, being in the dark and trying to figure out what your brand is all about is really a lonely process. And it's filled with a lot of misinformation, a lot of really false practices. It's finding your superpowers and all this kind of stuff, which really doesn't help you in the end. And it's really it's more confusing than it is solving the problem or creating momentum behind your brand. And that's why you see all these brands that really do well at this, like Nike, like Apple, like Amazon, like Netflix. They are way out ahead of all these other people because they are intentional. They are some of them are purpose driven. They know what they're doing. They know where their horizon line is and how to set new ones. They're purposeful, and they have all the pieces of code already embedded and the money to support them. So, I always I can pick what I want to work on, and I can, and I've worked on so many things. I've worked with Coretta Scott King. I've worked with so many amazing companies and within, United Nations and all these, and Levi's and so forth. And Lego and some of the great brands. And so I always say that I like working on whatever I'm working on next. It's always the next thing, because once you work on something, the thrill of getting there is over a little bit, so it's, might sound kind of dumb, but I'm willing to work on anything these days. I've already worked on all the great brands. So I've already had one of the top 10 Super Bowl spots of all time, et cetera, et cetera. So all those usual, I've written for Forbes, I've published my book, it's required reading at YouTube, and all these usual ladders of success, if you will, I've already done that. And so I'm in a time where I can do whatever I want to do, and so I just work on the things I want to work on. Well, the one thing that we are working on right now is to end systemic racism. That's something that we're working on right now. And I'm working with a group of, tiny little group of people to help do that. Because if racism is systemic, then we can break down that system and break it apart and reverse engineer it. So that's what we're working on now. And that's something that I've always wanted to do. I wouldn't say that's something I've always wanted to do, but it needs doing, doesn't it? I thought about it when I was creating it, because when I had the first one, I think the first thing I thought of was icons. And I thought of the Nike swoosh and the mermaid, Starbucks mermaid, and the Apple logo, and the cross, the crucifix, and the American flag, right? And those kinds of things. The silhouette of a Coke bottle, which is it's also iconic, right? And then I thought about creation stories, and then I thought about creed, think different, just do it, all these other things, sayings that people had, and Coca's did. And then it got a little harder, right? And so then I thought about non-believers, and because it was, like I spoke about earlier, there was the Cola Wars, and the Mac versus PC was very big. Because I was working on IBM, but we used Macs to write IBM commercials. And then I started thinking about a lexicon, or the sacred words that communities have. Ice grande, skinny decaf latte, right? For Starbucks, because Starbucks was big at that time. And then of course a leader, and I don't know, creation story, as mentioned before. So creation story, creed, icons, rituals was important, lexicon, non-believers, and leader. and that's 7. And 7 is sort of a magic word. People would tell me, oh, you forgot something, belongers. Well, belongers is the result of putting those 7 pieces together. And, people would come up with other things. But the important thing to mention is that, no, I don't think there's another one. I would think of other ones, but they would just be a subset of one of those 7. But the important thing, and this is the question that people always ask, okay, that's because people try to have simple things, and this is 7 is too complicated. So there's the one thing, the why, right? Well, that's just one piece of code. That's creed, right? Or there's the, or what people always ask, well, what's the one, or 3? What are the best ones? But the opportunity here, or the challenge, I guess, is that it takes all 7. And these 7, they ping both the rational parts of our brain and the emotional parts of our brain. They fill in all the bullet points that we need for something to be valid and be functional, I guess. And then they fill in all the emotional parts that create desire and passion. And once you put those 2 things together, you have this sort of cosmic thing that blows up inside your brain and makes things meaningful, right? And memorable. And they once you start detracting, pulling things away, it becomes less meaningful. And so that's the real important thing. And it's not that there's an extra one laying out there. I don't think there is. There might be, but maybe someday I'll say, oh wait, I was wrong. There are 8. But 7's enough for anyone. And right now, and so it's just really filling in those blanks. But it's not just filling in those blanks. Once you fill them in, you have to keep doing them over again and making them fresh and vital all over again. Because once you it's not enough just to have them. It's great to have them, but it's not enough to just, we got that done. Okay, let's do something else now. Because that's when brands they do that, they enjoy this success for a while, and that success lasts 3 to 5 years, maybe longer, but eventually they become irrelevant. They become a fad and irrelevant. And there are companies like that, I think about 600 of them went out of business this year already. So so there you go. So I don't think there's another one. The 7's plenty for anyone to work with. It's complex enough, I think. But I think it's complex because people are also complex, and there's a lot going on up here. So there you go.